Hello and welcome to a breakout session about climate risks to the safety system. I am Samuela Apia, your session host, and I'm connecting with you today from the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. Here is the agenda for today. We are looking forward to some great discussions today. So before we get started, let me go over the two Zoom functions we'll be using today. We'll be using the chat function located at the bottom of your screen for discussion throughout the presentation. We'll also be using the Q&A function. Please make note of where this is and use the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen if you need help. At the end of the presentation, we will have a question and answer period. At the time, you can click on the Q&A function to type in your questions. So now let's get to it. I'd like to introduce our two presenters and turn it over to them. Please welcome Coral Byton-Heiss, Technical Safety BC's Leader of Climate Action and Sustainability, and Ryan Hazlitt, Leader of Incident Investigations.
Thank you very much. So before we get into the presentation today, we would like to start off by hearing from you. So we are wondering, how have you seen climate change impact your community or work lately? So please use the chat button at the bottom of your screen to type in your answers. And again, we're wondering, how has climate change impacted you lately in your community or your work? So for example, in my community, we had temperatures of 35 degrees 2 weeks ago, which is about 15 degrees higher than is normal for May. So I'll give you some time to type in your answers.
While those questions are coming in, I was talking to Coral this morning about a article that I saw in the paper just about EV charging in condominiums and how that's becoming such a common thing. So it might not even be incidents, but it might be green technology that you're seeing being adopted as well.
Yeah, that's right. We'd be interested to hear about those experiences too. Thanks, Ryan. So Karen says, extreme temperatures causing wildfires. Yeah, definitely. As was mentioned in the main session earlier, we are now seeing wildfires and floods happening at the same time. Overheating within buildings, poor air quality due to forest fires. Yes, exactly. Yeah, merit still hasn't required from the devastating floods. Yeah, storm activity increasing.
Yeah, we're actually going to talk a little bit about an incident involving lightning a little later on in the presentation, something that we're seeing a lot of.
Yeah, sea levels. Yeah, much more extreme winters. We have some case studies involving that coming up. Siding melting on someone's home. That's extreme.
Vulnerable populations, that's definitely something that we're seeing. It seems to impact those populations even more so, something that we're keeping a close eye on.
Yeah, definitely. Rising insurance rates. Yes. Yeah, the heat dome, atmospheric river. Overheating, increased temperatures, increasing electrical demand. Yep.
As an engineer, I really like this comment, engineering design air temperatures and ASHRAE weather data. We're going to talk a little bit about that, whether extremes are accurately captured in the codes and standards that we reference and adopt.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of mention of the heat dome. Inability to obtain home insurance during wildfire season. Yeah, I think I've heard of that. If there's a wildfire burning a certain distance from you, you can't get home insurance. Ryan, you might know about that from your work experience.
Yeah, I have some past experience working in the insurance world, and certainly that's something I saw professionally and also just personally. And in a townhome, I've seen our insurance rates go up significantly.
Yeah, agricultural impacts. Yeah, absolutely. These are fantastic observations, and many of them connect with what we're going to be talking about today. So I think it's time to hop into the presentation. So today we will give you an overview of our teams and the work we do, and then we'll get into our incident case studies. And feel free to use the Q&A function to ask your questions throughout the presentation. We might be able to answer them as we go, and if not, we do have time for a Q&A period at the end. So I will now pass it over to Ryan.
Perfect. Thanks, Coral. And thank you, everybody, for your engagement during that discussion. We really want this to be a discussion-oriented breakout session, and we want to hear from you. So that's great. So just a little bit on incident investigations and what we do at Technical Safety BC. So we are specifically, our role is to investigate incidents and restore confidence in the safety system after these incidents occur, and hopefully inspire improvements to the safety system after understanding the causes and contributing factors. And one of our principles that you'll see on the screen there is transparency. So not only do we want to understand this, but we want to report these out to the people of BC. And that's part of what we're doing here today, is making sure that these stories are told so that the safety system is aware of these hazards and how we can work together to combat them. And specifically, we've seen a lot of incidents with climate change being a factor, either as a contributing factor or maybe more so as a primary cause. And that's something we're looking to call out more explicitly. And we're working hard with Coral's team to address that. So I'll hand it over to Coral's team to talk about her role.
Thank you so much. So our climate action and sustainability team was formed in 2020 in response to our growing awareness that climate change is a major emerging safety risk. The focus of our work is on the safety aspects of climate change. So that includes identifying emerging risks created by the interaction between climate change and technical equipment, as well as enabling the safe adoption of emerging low carbon technologies. So over the past couple of years, my team has been focused on doing research to figure out how climate events like heat waves, wildfires, and floods interact with the technical equipment that we regulate, for example, boilers, chairlifts, and electrical equipment. And we're interested specifically in how these interactions could create safety risks and hazards. We've also been doing research to understand how we can best enable the safe adoption of emerging low carbon technologies like heat pumps and electric vehicle chargers and hydrogen. As part of our work, as Ryan mentioned, we've been monitoring our incident reports to understand where climate change is contributing to incidents and where incidents are involving these emerging low carbon technologies that I mentioned. So understanding climate-related incidents helps us to better understand how we can proactively manage safety risks and hazards. And today, we are going to share some of these incidents with you, some of the incidents that we've seen over the past couple of years. And the common thread that you'll see in these incidents is that they all occurred during weather extremes. And so you might also notice that each incident has a number of contributing factors like improper maintenance, malfunctioning equipment, improper use of equipment, but they do all have in common extreme weather. So I'm going to pass it over to Ryan now to take us through our first case study.
Thanks, Coral. So our first case study it's a specific incident, but it also applies more broadly to something we've been seeing fairly frequently over the last couple of years. In terms of overloaded electrical in general. So this particular incident is a service switch at a multi-unit commercial building that overheated. And what we found in the investigation is that it overheated because electrical loads were being added over the course of several years. And those electrical loads, and this is where climate change and the increasing temperatures we get really comes into play. Those increasing electrical loads were the result mainly of the addition of rooftop air conditioners to the building over the course of many years and through multiple units. And what we found is that the main electrical service coming into the building wasn't upgraded at the same rate that these additions were added. And so we ended up getting this service switch that was actually undersized for the load that this building was experiencing. And I think one of the things that this in particular highlights for us is that not only do we have to look at the individual components of the system, but we need to look at the system as a whole when we're addressing additions and things like that. And so, yeah, as we see ever increasing temperatures and the need for cooling in order to work and live, we're seeing these added electrical loads, and we want to make sure that we account for that, not only at the individual unit level, but at the system level as well. And the article I mentioned earlier, it was from the Condominium Homeowners Association. It mentioned the same thing when we're looking at stratas, townhouses, condominiums that you might live in. If you're an electrician on the call, those load calculations are extremely important, and that's something that we're seeing. So that's the first incident, and I'll pass it on to Coral to address the second one.
Thank you. So this incident is also related to extreme heat, and it happened during the summer of 2021 in a mobile home in 100 Mile House. So the home had a gas fireplace, which you actually can't see in this photo. It's just over to the left. But the gas fireplace had a continuous pilot that was malfunctioning at the time. It was emitting carbon monoxide, but it hadn't been detected yet or caused an issue yet because it was actually being vented up the chimney. During the summer heat wave, the family living in the house installed a portable air conditioner for cooling, and unfortunately, the air conditioner depressurized and pulled carbon monoxide into the home from the gas fireplace, and it sent 2 people to the hospital. So this incident is interesting because it shows the unexpected consequences of 2 technologies interacting. And so what we see here is an existing safety risk, which is a malfunctioning fireplace, being exacerbated by climate change, in this case, the portable air conditioner that was being used for cooling during a heat wave. I'll now pass it over to Ryan to take us to the other end of temperature extremes.
Yeah, so as Coral mentioned, we go from heat, and we also, especially up north, see the extreme cold. I noticed Simon in his last comment in the chat there was talking about Fort St. John and the temperature swings that he gets there, and so this particular incident, it happened way up north, and there was a extreme cold weather snap that lasted over an extended period of time. And what ended up happening is the existing heating systems in the residence weren't able to keep up with the cold that they were experiencing. And so the resident, in order to stay warm during this cold snap, decided to use auxiliary heat with propane tanks that they brought into the residence. Unfortunately, there was a leak, and the damage is obvious from the photographs here, but there was also a significant injury to the resident. So it was quite a tragic event, and it just highlights the importance of dealing with extreme temperatures and also dealing with the rural and remote areas of our province, who are often seeing the effects of climate change at an increased rate compared to what we're seeing in the lower mainland, for example, which is where I am currently. And yeah, thanks for the comment, Simon. Big ice buildups, and Coral's going to get into that in a case study coming up shortly.
Thanks. And yeah, before I do that, Simon, we don't have the case study in this presentation, I don't think, but we did have an incident occur related to a service mast and a extreme snow load on a home, which ended up breaking the mast and causing a fire. So yeah, excellent point there. So the incident in the photo here, though, happened at the end of 2021 in Rossland. And this is a really interesting incident, as they all are, but this one involves a chairlift, and we know chairlifts are designed for extreme conditions, but even they can be affected by the abnormal weather that we've been experiencing recently. So what you see in the photo happened during that extreme winter storm of 2021. I think we all experienced that throughout the province. I know I took my dog on the coldest walk of his life during that storm. And what we see here is snow and ice accumulating on the chairlift, and the cable became so heavy that the lift deroped. And also the communications cable was impacted. And luckily this happened before the chairlift opened in the morning, and the crew was actually clearing snow at the time, so nobody was harmed. And also there are sensors, so the crew immediately knew what was happening. but incidents like this can cause really costly damage to equipment. Now over to Ryan for our final case study.
Yeah, so I think this final case study it kind of brings I was going to say the best of both worlds, but maybe the worst of both worlds into one place, and that's where we've got extreme weather as well as an incident involving green technology. And so what you're seeing on this one is a windstorm. This was quite recently in the Agassiz area, and it actually blew the solar panels, some of them right off the building. And what may not be obvious is this is an elementary school as well. So obviously significant concern for the kids around that if there's falling debris. And so something I think that's really interesting to look at is some people may kind of blow this off as being, no pun intended, as the periphery of the safety system, you know, the support structure for the solar panel system as opposed to the solar panels themselves. But I think this calls to attention that safety is a shared responsibility among many parties and contractors involved with the green technology. And we want to make sure at Technical Safety BC that we have the right resources so that as these emerging technologies come up, that contractors are trained and that they understand and have the resources to work on these new technologies. And you know, similar to ramps on chairlifts or maybe venting and gas systems, that it might not be most obviously part of the technical equipment, but it's still an incident that we look at and want to be a part of the solution for.
Thanks. Yeah, and I'm glad that incident happened on a weekend, so there were no children around. So that concludes our case studies, and now we'd like to hear from you again. So again, using the chat function at the bottom of your screen, we are interested in two questions. We have two questions for you. First, we're wondering, what are you seeing in the field? Is it consistent with what we've shared today, or are you seeing other things, and what are those things? And then the second question we have for you is, how can we help you to better understand and manage climate risks like the ones we've presented today? So two questions, they're up on the screen, again, using the chat function to type in your answers. And while you are typing in your answers, I would like to ask Ryan to explain what is happening in this photo, please.
Yeah, and thanks, Carl. And an interesting photo. Maybe it doesn't really look like a technical system, does it? But in this case, what we have is that's a lightning strike mark on a tree. And this tree happened to be near an underground gas line. And what happened is the lightning strike actually energized the tracer wire around the gas line and melted holes underground in the gas line. And so this seemingly benign lightning strike ended up in an underground gas leak. Luckily, this was in a field and didn't result in containment and a subsequent explosion like what we saw in the Comox or Fernie House incidents that Phil referred to in our main session there. But certainly potential for consequences, and it's something we're working closely on to try and address that hazard going forward.
Thanks. All right, still waiting for some answers here. I know those are big questions, so it'll probably take everyone a little bit of time to type in your answers.
Coral, I think you gave me an interesting stat on lightning related to climate change recently around its frequency and how climate change affects that. Can you touch on that?
I don't know if I did give you a stat.
Okay, that might have been someone from your team.
Might have been someone from the team.
I heard that there was something like a 7% increase in lightning strikes with every 1 degree of temperature warming or something like that.
Oh, wow.
I don't know the exact number, but something certainly to be aware of. Yeah.
Okay, we have some answers coming in. Yep, increasing need to stay aware of climate and environmental hazards. Agreed. And we have a question here from Stephanie. Are there guidelines or is there information available to plan for climate risks so they can be better managed and the effects less devastating? Yes, there are, from a variety of sources. And one thing that we can share today actually is Technical Safety BC does publish some information about how to stay safe during floods and wildfires and other climate events. And I'll share that link in the chat with everyone.
Jeff mentioned there needs to be some more engineering oversight on construction of all types, and I think engineering oversight is I'm an engineer myself. I think it's definitely an important piece of our safety system. And one thing I'm noticing in engineering is, often we're working with the codes and the standards to ensure safety. And I think one thing that the engineering world as a whole needs to keep in mind is that those codes and standards are really a floor. They're not necessarily a ceiling, and we can certainly go over and above that. And seeing how climate change is accelerating right now, I think it's a great opportunity for us to expand above the floor and look at what the potential for climate change is in the future and make sure we're designing accordingly.
Agreed. Okay, we've got a bunch here. Where can we get information on green contractors on your website? That is a really interesting question. We don't have that information on our website. We do have the contractor lookup tool, but we don't specify low carbon technologies in that. But an interesting thing to consider for the future, for sure.
Impacts on agriculture and poultry barns, that's an interesting thing. I know that I've seen some of those electrical loads I know are for keeping water sources warm enough to not freeze during extreme cold temperatures, but also cooling those poultry barns with fans and stuff during the heat events. So yeah, obviously there's going to be a significant electrical draw during those temperature changes, and we definitely hear you with codes adapting quickly enough, and it's I think it's something we're working on closely.
Yeah, and I'm seeing an answer here around for the second question. What would better help you to understand and manage climate risk? Communication of incidents to adjust policies and procedures. So Ryan, can we share the incident page on our website?
Yeah, I'll have to grab it. But it's there is a repository of incident investigations on our website. So whenever we complete an incident investigation that has significant learnings for the industry, we publish it in a summary report on that website. So I'll look that up and I will provide that now.
I think Kate's on it actually.
Kate's on it. Okay.
Okay, another comment here. I'm interested in guidelines that could be applied to electrical work in buildings on properties that have flooding potential. Yes. If so, could these be applied as engineering best practices, even if not in the Canadian Electrical Code or BC Electrical Safety Regulation? So we actually, in the most recent Canadian Electrical Code, which BC adopted, there is a provision for the installation of electrical equipment in flood zones. So electrical equipment has to be installed above grade in flood zones. So that's just one small step, but it is an important step for properties with flooding. The barrier here is that we don't always know where flood zones are. Not all municipalities have up-to-date flood mapping. So there's many parts to this that need to all work together to make that happen. All right. What else? Anything else you want to speak to, Ryan?
Interesting comment, I think, around the car charger plugs. So they can't use the plastic ones because they just break, and that's not very helpful. So I think maybe that's a small example, but I think where we see code preventing us from adapting to climate change, that's something we want to hear about for sure, because we do have a number of people that sit on various code committees and can help influence change in the right direction.
And interesting note about that. So it sounds like they break from the cold. We also heard of some EV chargers melting during the heat wave of 2021. So susceptible to both ends of temperature extremes. Okay, yeah, most authorities having jurisdiction require electrical, mechanical equipment to be placed above the 200-year flood level. Yeah, and because those flood levels are unfortunately changing, it can be hard to determine exactly what that is, but everyone's doing their best to stay up to date with that.
Yeah, just a secondary point to that, I think that's especially the current codes, but a lot of our electrical and mechanical equipment is designed to last a long time, and we still have plenty of equipment built in the 20th century that we're dealing with, and it might not have had the same levels of protection. And I think that's certainly something we've been seeing in the floods and the wildfires and the heat domes, that older systems can be impacted more significantly because of that.
Yeah, I agree. And so I'll give a shout out again to the link I shared earlier around flood safety. So there's some helpful tips there about how to best prepare your electrical and gas and boiler, et cetera, equipment in the event of a flood. So there's kind of different actions that you can take to make things safer. And our communications team has put together some great information about that. And I want to share one story related to that. So in the 2021 atmospheric river, in November 2021, in the Fraser Valley, we saw a lot of technical equipment damaged at that time. But what we also saw was that some elevators didn't get damaged during the floods, and we were trying to figure out why that was. And what we found was that the contractors or the building managers, before evacuating for the floods, they had the foresight to move their elevators to an upper floor. And this prevented damage that would have otherwise been very costly. So sometimes just small actions like that can make a huge difference.
Interesting point regarding heat pumps here. So lots of refrigerant at the time of installation, and obviously that's not great for performance or the environment. And controls that are programmed to flip conservatively. So that's an interesting thing. And I think from an engineering standpoint, efficiencies and controls are something we want to look really closely at when we're setting things up and designing them. So that's a really interesting thing to hear, and it wasn't something I was aware of in the past. In terms of excessive loads on the electrical service, though, I mean, even without that, in some cases, like I mentioned in that first case study, if we're not doing the load calculations on the main system, or even looking at the individual units capacity, we can end up with excessive electrical loads. Another way that I know some people have been combating that is around load sharing switches and the use of load mitigation devices. So that's something we're watching as well, and looking for incidents around those to make sure they're being used properly, and certified components are being purchased, because I know they're available in lots of places, including Amazon and stuff like that.
Yes, and keeping an eye on our information bulletins as well for information about load calculations. Highly recommend that as we learn more about potential safety hazards. We are continually trying to share information and knowledge, and one of the ways that we do that is through our information bulletins, which you can find on our website. There's a really nice way to sort them, so I'm going to share that link as well. I'm looking at it here on my other screen. So there it is, our regulatory notices space. I think we are actually at, we've run out of time for this part of our session, and thank you all so much for the great discussion today. I will pass it over to Samuela.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Coral and Ryan. And thank you everyone for the wonderful discussion. If you have further feedback or you want more information, please get in touch with us. Both Coral and Ryan's emails are on the screen. And as always, you can also reach out to us through our website or by phone. Now we will open our Q&A period. If you have a question, please do click on the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. It's located at the bottom right of your screen.
And while we're waiting for some questions, one of our colleagues kindly nudged Ryan and I, do we want to talk about how to report an incident or hazard at Technical Safety BC?
Yeah, great point, Carl. I always like to put in a plug for that. We don't get to know about these incidents unless people report them to us. We can't be everywhere at once. So that is a hugely important step that we want to hear. And like I said, if you're not sure if it's an incident, if it's the support structure of a solar panel and you're not positive, send it in to us and we can filter it from there. We want more information than less. So in answer to the question directly, there's two ways of reporting incidents and hazards to us. So the first one is through the incident reporting form that Coral has kindly shared in the chat. So that allows you to both report incidents or hazards. Both are on that specific form. And then you can also just report it through our client care center through either phone or email. And all of those will make their way back to my team. And we investigate every incident that comes into us through either ourselves and the incident investigations team, or with the help of our wonderful safety officers positioned around the province to do the field work and having that local subject matter expertise, which we know is so important in climate-related events. So yeah, those are the two ways to report it, and please report anything you're seeing out there.
Yeah, it helps us so much. It's really helping us to understand emerging risks, because anything we see right now related to extreme weather is we're only going to see more of it in the future. And we're looking for several different causal factors in incidents. So really reporting helps us so much.
So we have one question here, and the question is, has Technical Safety BC considered overseeing climate mitigation efforts? The reduction of GHG emissions, the refrigerant leak issue has the potential to mitigate emissions with a very high global warming potential.
Yeah, thank you. I can take that one. So we are researching the question of refrigerant leakage currently. It's something that came to our attention a while ago, and there doesn't seem to be a clean answer on who has jurisdiction over that necessarily. So that is something that we're actively looking into. Yes. Thank you for that question.
And we have another one. Does Technical Safety have the authority to investigate a structural complaint like solar panel support?
Great question. I can handle that. So the short answer is yes. The long answer is it becomes a little bit complicated, but the short answer around investigation is if it involves a regulated component, including the peripherals to that regulated equipment, we have the authority under the Safety Standards Act to be able to perform an investigation on that. In terms of recommendations and how we address that solar panel support issue, if it's related to the building itself, it may be more of an advocacy approach as opposed to something that we can take action on directly. However, solar panel support is often within, for example, the certified installation instructions for the solar panel, which does fall under our jurisdiction, as well as that of the certification body that does the testing and certifies those instructions as well. So a little bit of a long answer to what might seem like a simple question, but yes, in terms of investigation, we do have the authority to look into those things.
We have another question popping up. So it reads, G7 will require LNG industry to convert to hydrogen. Is BC aware of the requirements by 2035 and the federal government's changes? Gas education changes are re-education of the gas industry infrastructure.
Yeah, I can take that. Also, I just noticed that name is Dead Battery Depot. Love that name. Yeah, so we are, we started looking into hydrogen a couple of years ago because we recognized that it was an emerging technology, emerging low carbon technology. And we've been working with the government and the Oil and Gas Commission and others to understand what the jurisdictional landscape is for hydrogen. So we do have a better understanding now of everyone's role. And yeah, so we're aware of the upcoming changes and of the need to shift to lower carbon gases. So yeah, agreed.
I'll just chime in on that as well, Coral. I know our gas regulatory leadership team is also very involved in this switch to hydrogen, and they are keeping close eyes on it. They're involved in code committees and discussions around that as well. So it's something that we're very actively involved in that transition for.
Awesome, thank you guys. And there's another question for you. So the peak demand for electricity is likely shifting to the warm months from winter. Will this affect any of Technical Safety BC's regulatory certification inspection activities?
It's a good question.
Sorry, Carl. I'll
Go
start
ahead,
very
Aaron.
briefly from incident investigations. We are certainly seeing a lot of our overheated electrical and now actually occurring in the summer. So in terms of inspections related to investigations, yeah, that's something that we're certainly doing, and it's directly in line with the number of incidents that are getting reported to us. But Coral, you'll be able to speak more broadly, I think, to our activities.
Yeah, I can talk about the climate hazard inventory and where that kind of leads. So like Ryan mentioned, we're seeing incidents happen related to this, and especially in the summer months. And so this is an area that was highlighted in our climate hazard inventory. Our climate hazard inventory is something that Phil referenced in the main session. And essentially it's our approach to systematically understanding climate risks to technical equipment. So far we've completed the climate hazard inventory for gas, electrical, boiler, pressure vessel, and refrigeration, and elevating. And it's informed by expert judgment, field observations, and incident data. So the whole idea behind this is that once we have an understanding of how climate change is creating risks to technical equipment, then we can absorb this understanding into our regular risk oversight model and treat it like any other safety risk. And so that includes changing regulation or recommending changes to regulation or code where necessary. So where there's a safety case, then we would recommend changes to try to mitigate that risk. It also includes our other regulatory tools, such as information bulletins, so communicating safety information, and also communicating through our regular communications channels, like we are with our flood and wildfire safety campaigns. So yeah, the answer is really that understanding any climate related safety risk helps us to then proactively manage risk throughout the province using all of our regular tools. So I'll leave it there.
Awesome. Thank you, Coral and Ryan. Another question which popped up is, something like the solar panel issue could be mitigated by requiring spacing between the panels to allow wind to blow through. That would mean using a racking system that maintains edge bonding, but also keeps panels separated. Who looks into that or brings changes like that into effect?
I can comment a little bit on that. It's a little bit outside of my my general area, I would say, but I know our electrical team is looking at solar panel installations quite actively right now. And again, anybody within our regulatory leadership team is involved in the codes, and so keeping them apprised of that, of these types of maybe gaps, again, no pun intended, in the codes or standards that are preventing us from dealing with climate change, I think is really important, because the more knowledge we get from the field, from the system, the more we can pass on to those code committees in order to address those in standards and codes.
Yeah, that's a great point. And also another comment here that's related, perhaps, I don't know if this is exactly what this person is saying, but there also might be building code considerations here as well. So some of it would be under our jurisdiction, some of it might be under more a municipal jurisdiction, but certainly opportunities in both areas. And Ryan and I have shared our email addresses on a slide that will be shown shortly, and you can also just reach out to us directly if you are noticing like safety gaps or opportunities related to low carbon technologies or climate events. We're more than happy to hear from you, because we're essentially trying to access information in whatever way we can.
Thank you, guys. And one more question. Someone says, I'm installing a mid-sized commercial solar system this summer, and I'll be looking into changing our racking plan. Thanks for the info. So you're more like showing gratitude to you. So thanks.
That's great. We love to hear when our stories help inspire changes that help us make us more resilient. So thank you for that. That's awesome.
Please keep the questions coming.
And there are our email addresses, so you can also ask us questions after or send us information. We would love to hear from you.
Coral, Kate also gave us a poke to talk very briefly about information available on our website to deal with extreme weather. Do you want to share a little bit about that? And I will share it in the feed.
Yeah, that's I think that's, oh yeah, Kate sent the kind of homepage for that. Yeah, so this is where you'll find information on flood safety, wildfire safety, extreme cold, etc. And this information is also informed by incident investigations and by what we've heard from folks around the province. So keep the information coming in, and then we can keep sharing good safety information. And we also encourage you to share any of these links with people that you know if you're experiencing extreme weather in your community. Anything that can help folks to stay safe.
Thank you, guys. And one last question. Do you interact with the municipalities who are not part of Technical Safety BC's mandate on these issues?
Yeah, I assume you are talking about the municipalities that aren't one of the 10 authorities that have jurisdiction over electrical and or gas. So I would say we have interacted more with the 10 authorities having jurisdiction. So that would be Vancouver, Burnaby, Richmond, Victoria, and a number of others. But we are interacting with other municipalities. For example, recently we've started a partnership with the District of Squamish to try to understand how we can better collaborate in the event of a flood. So Squamish is actually where I live, and we have experienced several floods recently. And so there's kind of some mixed jurisdiction there. There's municipal and technical safety BC jurisdiction. So we're trying to understand how we can better communicate and collaborate during floods. And we would like to expand this sort of pilot elsewhere as well. So definitely interacting with other municipalities through kind of various projects and forums. Thank you for the question.
Awesome. So we are almost at time. If there are no further questions, we'll close this session. Thank you for participating in this important discussion. We hope this presentation was valuable, and we invite you to keep in touch and also engage with us through the options displayed on your screen. If you have any further questions, do not hesitate to reach out. And one last thing, once the session ends, you will see a survey link on the screen. Please do take a few minutes to complete it. Your answers will help us adjust and improve future events with you in mind. Thank you all again, and have a wonderful day.